Joining us to discuss this and other issues, our good friend Stephen Yates, foreign policy expert who worked in the Bush-Cheney White House advising the former VP on these issues, and he joins us via phone. Stephen, always appreciate your time, especially this is your wheelhouse, your area of expertise. But that is, I mean, do you share? Am I being maybe a little bit too over analytical with this? But it seems as though we have harsher words for Burma, and here, we have American hostages, and the White House is in talks. And we just don't seem to have as firm language or as harsh language for Iran. And we're still pursuing this agreement. And yet it seems like we're taking our outrage out in words on Burma. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't think you're wrong. And it's really the burden of every administration when they come in to lay out what their priorities are, make the case for any adjustments, and explain what the rationale is for why they're going to spend presidential or cabinet level time in one part of the world versus others. There's this very odd report that was in the Politico playbook, which is the source of all truth, of course. And it's quoting an unnamed person, which makes it even more truthful. But it says that President Joe Biden is tired of dealing with the Middle East. Well, I think most of us stopped reading at President Joe Biden is tired. But then he goes on to try to say it's because they are going to prioritize other issues that matter more, like the Asia Pacific and Europe and the Western Hemisphere. Well, in what universe is Europe more important right now? And there's just this long-term old think, basically straight out of the 70s and 80s, that fills the Washington establishment that Joe Biden represents, and his staffer now runs the State Department, that when they're talking about allies, they're really just talking about old Europe. They're not talking about our allies in the Gulf that have been threatened by Iran, whether it's Israel or the Arab allies. They're not really talking about our allies in Asia. They're talking about a far-off, tragic situation in Burma, but nonetheless something that's very, very remote when it comes to global politics, strategy, and American security interests. And so there's been a lot of very unusual, undefined talk by the administration. It sort of begs the question, who's in charge and what are they up to? And really it just seems like they're trying to pick up where the Obama administration left off, and it's basically being run by staffers who want to cut a deal with the Islamist government in Tehran at the expense of our other allies in the broader Middle East.
Yeah, no, I think that's and I like that, the old Europe. That's basically what they're talking about. I speaking of deprioritizing Middle East, and that's a story up at Politico right now, saying that the Middle East is not one of Biden's top priorities, especially when you look at the three advisors on issues of China, coronavirus, and climate. I mean, we have the climate czar that travels on a private plane. But okay, what kind of signal is that sending to our I wouldn't say allies, but countries that we've been working with, Middle Eastern countries, as it relates to the Abraham Accords? I mean, are they going to look at this positioning from the Biden administration as maybe an excuse? Will they use it as an excuse to maybe not honor their commitment to the Abraham Accords? Do you anticipate something like that happening?
Well, I've heard a lot of messages of concern coming from especially Gulf states that are quite concerned about this seeming ardent suitor approach to just try to go back to seeking some kind of an accommodation or deal with Iran. So much changed from 2016 to the present. And again, it's just sort of amazing in the era of wokeness that an administration can get away with giving such favor to continental Europe when it comes to its influence on world affairs, instead of dealing directly with allies who don't look like old Europe in these areas where the conflicts are actually occurring. There's just a kind of a cultural imperialism behind this way of thinking that comes out of the ivory tower mentality of New England and old Europe education and political establishments. And I think there's a lot of people troubled in the Middle East. This is the wrong direction to go, ranging from allies in Israel to those in even faraway places like Australia.
Yeah, no, definitely. Faraway places like China, and Biden's reaction well, I mean, he actually received, I was just looking at a number of headlines here. New York Post called it horrific. His excuses for Beijing's Uyghur genocide. The State Department had described, as you're aware of, Stephen, China's mass internment of Uyghur Muslims as, quote, atrocities that shock the conscience. And Biden, however, said that it's cultural differences. That's how he described it. We were talking about his comment a little bit last week, but he says, yeah, these are just different norms. He said, if you know anything about Chinese history, his direct quote, it has always been the time when China has been victimized by the outer world is when they haven't been unified at home. So the central, well, vastly overstated, the central principle of Xi Jinping is that there must be a united, tightly controlled China. He uses his rationale for the things he does based on that. Your thoughts on that, because that does not project strength, Stephen.
Well, it doesn't project strength, and I may be one of those people foolish enough to pay for an advanced degree that includes studying Chinese history. And I could remind the president that the Communist Party was established in the last century, not 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and that the Communist Party doesn't equal China. And that form of authoritarian government isn't Chinese. It was born out of Europe and imported into China. And this whole idea that there's norms. Cultural relativism is a beautiful thing if you're trying to get out of obligation, but it isn't an actual way to maintain trust or order or peace in the world. So this was sort of talking points that Beijing could only smile ear to ear in hearing, and shows a flexibility worthy of that exchange that Obama had with Medvedev about the election in 2012, just waiting until after he's elected. This is Joe Biden suggesting he can be flexible with China even if there's genocide going on there. And this isn't just right-wing groupthink. Fred Hyatt of the Washington Post editorial board is openly questioning whether the Olympics should be held in a country that has a genocide going on right as we speak.
And that's my final question to you. On this issue, as it relates to China, there are lawmakers that have been calling for a boycott of the Olympics in Beijing. To me, it's weird that we're even discussing whether or not we should participate. I mean, particularly in it, not overlooking, but putting to the side the genocide that they are engaged in. But the whole planet is still reeling from a pandemic that was launched because of incompetency, or who knows, we can't even investigate. Wuhan, China, to me, to go forward and pretend that it's normal enough to have the Olympics in Beijing seems insane to me. Do you think that the likelihood of our participation, do you think that the country will participate? Do you think that the Olympics in Beijing are going to fall apart? Or is it going to go forward and what's done is done?
Well, I have to say what I've seen in terms of professional and global sports in recent years gives me exceedingly low confidence that they can make a rational and moral choice. And so I think it's mind-blowing. Today is the day when we celebrate the miracle on ice, going back to that 1980 Winter Olympics, one of the best moments of my childhood. And that was when the Olympics meant something.
Right.
And if they proceed with these Olympics under those circumstances, number one, I don't know why we would send athletes in good faith into an environment where you can't be confident of public health and good conditions.
Right.
And number two, the Olympics have been politicized for many, many, many decades. Why would you play into these politics? It makes no good sense. But if you look at the NBA and others, you just can't really have cause for confidence that morality and good strategy is going to guide this decision process. You
bring up a really good point, too, about our athletes going over there. I would actually be concerned about that because I don't put anything past the Communist Party of China at this point. And if I were an athlete, I would be nervous about going over there as well. So that's one I had not considered. Stephen Yates, always a pleasure to speak with you and appreciate your expertise on these issues. Safe travels to you, my friend, and we'll talk again soon.